Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Chris McPherson Show. We're up to episode 27 of bringing you all of the black and white of your sporting landscape. No grey opinions here, and we have a bumper episode for you again this week with lots of sport from around the sporting landscape. Of course, if you want to keep up to date with the said sporting landscape throughout the week, make sure you follow us on our social media channels. You can see us on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook, and on X or Twitter. The Chris Mack Show is the handle where you can find us for all of those channels. And if you want to keep up to date with our episodes, the two homes to find us, if you want to sit down and enjoy it in its full HD quality, check us out on YouTube, where you're probably watching us right now. Each week we drop the episodes there on a Thursday. You can subscribe to the channel. You can hit the bell down below. That will let you know when the episodes go live and keep you up to date. If you're a bit more of an active customer that wants to catch up on the go, then check us out on Spotify again. Just search The Chris McPherson Show. Nice and simple. We're easy to find, and you can keep up to date with all of your sport. This week, we're going to have a lot of things. We're going to have some flying water bottles. We're going to talk about contract dramas. We're going to head to the world of football with Mr. Consistent, Lachie Avil. We're going to talk some biffs with the returning Brodie Burrows. We'll burn some rubber with JR Carter. And we'll, of course, introduce you to a new guru. Our NBA guru, Ben Dunn, is going to come in and talk you through the play-ins and the playoffs. It might sound confusing, but if you stay tuned, Ben will clarify it all for you. But as we do each week, let's refuel and get things underway with Around the Grounds. Well, it's time to head around the grounds, and like a lot of sporting teams throughout the early parts of the season, we've had a few knocks, a few injuries, a few unavailabilities, but we're back to our first choice, full-strength roster at this time of year, and allowing the boys can put in some good performances. They might keep their way in the starting three. Lachlan, Avil from Roundball Australia and Brodie Burrows from Third Man Up. Welcome to the show, and welcome back, Broads.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me. Good to be back on board.
Lachie, let's get things underway. I know you're excited about this. I'm sure Broads is as well. He doesn't mind a little bit of the golf. It was some early mornings. We talked about this last week. Your sleep patterns are going to be very disrupted from what they normally are, Lachie, but it was well worth it. It came down to a playoff. You got absolutely no love in the Roundball Australia chat. The boys pasted you and I for our interest in golf, and Christian Monaghan's been banned from the show for 4 weeks for his behaviour. Mate, Rory McIlroy, the career Grand Slam. What more can we say?
Oh, well, there is plenty more to say, Chris. This is not just one tournament. This is not even just getting the career Grand Slam. This is, 14 years of hurts just unloaded in one moment. It was really emotional, honestly. If you're, somewhat of a golf fan and you know a little bit about Rory's story, then you just know how big this was for him to finally get a win at the Masters. You say it went to a playoff. It shouldn't have gone to a playoff. He should have had this home and hosed. He started off with a double on one on Sunday, which ironically he was saying after the round managed to just calm him down a little bit, because it's almost like he'd screwed up already. He'd kind of, that pressure was kind of released a little bit and he could focus and he got, I think it was 4 birdies in his next 7 or 8 holes or something like that. And then he's coming around Amen corner. He makes a really passive move to lay up on 13 and then duffs it into the pond from like 30 meters away. It was a typical Rory performance in the fact that he's such a quality golfer and he can make so many birdies and get himself in good positions. But when it came to the clutch time, he just constantly find a way to torture himself and put himself in positions where he should have had things locked up and didn't. And in the end, that bogey on 18 sent it to a playoff, which he came up pretty clutch in finally. And then just that release of emotion that we saw on the 18th green was quite incredible. So, yeah, massive day for him. He achieves the career Grand Slam, becomes one of just 6 golfers in history and the men's side of things to do so. And, he was already a legend of this golfing generation, but he's really just confirmed that this weekend.
Yeah, he certainly did. And Broads, look, it looked like, as Lachie said, he should have sealed it much earlier. Some of the other, people that were at the front of the running heading into the final round, Bryson DeChambeau and Lachie and I were talking about him just before. He hadn't played all that well across the first 3 rounds, but he played pretty ordinarily in the 4th round. Airberg faded, I guess, late as well. But then Justin Rose all of a sudden came from the clouds, shooting a final round 6 under to get to that playoff. But again, it was all on Rory's stick on the 18th.
I mean, that sums up Rory's career, doesn't it? Like the roller coasters, the up and downs. It was the perfect tournament for Rory to win this career slam, and it was unbelievable. Let's be honest, the pressure. I mean, the only thing that annoyed me was every single hole, the fans yelling out, "Get in the hole!" I mean, come on, do it once, that's enough, but not every single hole of every single player. I mean, that got a little bit annoying. I'm not sure if you've seen it. Do you see the Australian golf company Go Golfing and they're 25% off? They put a promotion on before the Masters and said, if Rory McIlroy wins a Masters and you book before, we'll give you 25% off your golf holiday that you book through us. Anyway, so it ended up costing him close to $1 million that they've booked through this. So 306,000 the people save with this, but it's not just this, it's future golf holidays. So obviously they backed against Rory and lost. So look that up if you haven't seen it. Go Golfing. It's cost them a fair bit of coin.
Wow, I just have to say, finally, I do feel for Justin Rose. That's twice in the Masters he's got to a playoff. Twice he's lost them. He has a 1-4 playoff record now on the PGA Tour. He won his first one. He was 1 from 1 in 2014, and he's lost 4 in a row since then, including that 2017 playoff to Sergio and now 2025 to Rory McIlroy. And I think there was a BMW Championship in there as well, up against Keegan Bradley. So, look, Justin Rose will be having some nervous moments about playoffs, despite the fact that he managed to come home with a wet sail. It's an interesting one, but well done to Rory, I think, is the prevailing message. And look, he's not done yet. There was a few people suggesting that he might have been in terms of big tournaments, but he's coming back with a vengeance, and you wouldn't write him off winning a couple more lock.
Yeah. Look, it's always a question that people have had of Rory, is like when he can get that, fifth major and kind of just release the well a little bit and unlock all that potential and not have the weight of his world, on his shoulders every time he goes and play a major. I think it's almost at a point now where, he's at that point of his life as a family person and his career where it feels like he's now ticked off a lot of those kind of golfing objectives. He'll still want to win an away Ryder Cup at the end of this season, which is probably the last thing that he has left to do. But apart from that, I think he looks a person that is now very content with what he has achieved on the golf course. So I probably lean slightly towards the other way. Maybe he picks up 1 or 2 more as he goes along. He's obviously a very, very talented golfer, but there's just not that same, I don't know, it is very, close after the Masters, but the fire, I don't know if he needs it. Obviously he'd want a few more, but I don't know if that burning need for it. I just think he can be quite content with what he's achieved in the game now.
Well, Brodie, he turns 36 next month. He's certainly got time on his side, but as Lachie said, whether he's got the drive or not will be the question.
Yeah, look, I think I'll probably go the other way in terms of what Lachie's thinking. I think when it comes to golf, getting this off his shoulders, and we know so much of Rory's career, he's just been carrying so much. He could have won so many more, but it comes down, and you don't want to say it, but he has choked a lot last minute, unfortunately, Rory. And I think maybe this could release the shackles. He's going out there now. He knows he's finally got that Masters in his back pocket. Are we going to see a Rory who doesn't have these moments where, he does fall apart? Are we going to see a Rory, maybe a freer Rory or a calmer one? So I look forward to maybe the next 12 to 24 months. I think we'll definitely find out.
Well, we certainly will. We'll head from golf, though, to rugby league, which is, look, there's no clean way to do that, I don't think.
Good luck.
Nathan Astor and his golfing endeavours, but Lachie Galvin has muddied all names Lachlan, Avil, and Brodie. This contract drama, he's decided he doesn't want to be at the West Tigers anymore because they're not that good, basically, and he can make some more money elsewhere. NRL and contracts, look, there's lots of sports that contracts are absolutely diabolical, but the NRL and contracts, and I'm an NRL fan, as we know, they're absolutely crap. They're an absolute mess. This whole thing that, 1st of November 2025, you can start looking at your options for 2027 because you need time to plan and do all these things. I'm not sure if they know what goes on in US sport, but just jumping ship because your team's not much good. I don't know. I don't know who wants to take off here. I'm bamboozled and confused by this.
Well, I'll have a little crack. I mean, you look at this. You're playing for the West Tigers, and you're surprised they're not doing that well. Like, come on, that should be the number one. That's I think that sticks out for you right there. But yeah, look, the NRL and their contract situation, Chris, I don't know if you're as frustrated as everyone else that sort of seems to be. It's, yes, it is a different sport to a lot of other codes where, you announce that you're leaving and then you essentially play with these blokes for the next, 6 months sometimes. But it's, as a, NRL diehard fan, what's your opinion on this situation? Because I really want to, get it from someone who does call a lot of games and, I'm a former referee. And do you enjoy this side of it, or would you rather scrap it altogether and just, that they leave when it's actually announced?
I definitely don't enjoy it. It's as I said, it's diabolical. It's a mess. And I think most of the blame sits with agents. Isaac Moses is at the top of that list. These agents that get there and they position their players, and again, there's no way, and AFL would be a similar situation. There's no way you can say, well, you can't manage coaches and players. It starts to get too hard. Then you got to be a specific coach manager. There's only 18 coaches, and who's going to manage them? And then where does that leave them? But you end up with these power struggles. Coaches have falling out with managers because they didn't pay another player so much, so then they go and convince other talent. Lachlan Galvin's a kid still, and Isaac Moses has a lot to answer for. He's not the first time he's done the Tigers over. We only need to go back to the Tedesco, Woods, and Mitch Moses era. And ironically, there's talk that that's where Lachie Galvin could go now with Dylan Brown having moved on to the Knights for in the future. But it's just a mess. This year already, if we look at the halves picture in the NRL, we've seen Dylan Brown sign for massive money to the Knights for next year. We've seen Daly Cherry Evans say that he's not going to stay at his current club beyond this season and he's going to go and chase money elsewhere or do something else. And he's at the end of his career, so I can sort of understand that a bit more. But Lachie Galvin now, there's talk that he's going to go and get $5 million for 5 years, 4 or 5 years somewhere else. And it's just bamboozling. No offense to Lachie Galvin, he's been solid, but he hasn't exactly, set the world on fire in a relatively short career. But these agents are driving these numbers. They're getting in these players, and it's just a mess. And it needs to sort itself out. Let's have a transfer window mid-season. Let's have a transfer window at the end of the season. And look, at the end of the day, if the club has to commit to putting you in a rental house for the first 3 months as part of that contract, well, let's create an allowance in the salary cap so that you can go and move house. But go and talk to some of the baseball players where you go and get traded from, you get traded from New York to LA, and then the next, 4 days later, not even that, you're already there. You play 2 games for LA, and then you find yourself at Atlanta. It's all over the shop. You're just bouncing across the country, and basically, we'll pack your stuff, we'll send it, we'll get it to you, get on there, and you could, you see times where someone will be playing for the Yankees, today, and then next week they're playing against the Yankees. I think there was one the other day where a game got rained out, and a player played, or might have been in a 3-game series, and he played for New York against the Dodgers this week, and then in 2 weeks when they played the 3rd game of that 3-game series, he played for the Dodgers against New York. Just get on with it. It's a professional career. They get paid reasonably well, not to the level the US guys do, but the clubs need to facilitate it. The managers need to pull their heads in, and we need to get on with letting football do the talking.
So just as we were talking about this, guys, I don't know if you've seen, but the Telegraph have just posted a story with some quotes from Lachie, and his explanation is that the biggest reason why he made this call is so that the Tigers have enough time to plan their roster without him in the future. That is his words, saying that he wants to just get things out so they can plan for their roster. That players aren't that considerate of the clubs they play for. They don't care that much.
Yeah, that's a nice cover job. It's like that guy that's only got 5 strands of hair left and he just sweeps them over, right? It's not anyone. Well, look, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt again. He's a young kid. I think he's probably not getting some good guidance in regards to coming out and saying that. But, one of the other quotes that was attributed to him, and again, I can't say that it was definitely a quote from him, but it was a line that was attributed to him around the fact that, he wants to be a first-choice half. And now there's talk he's going to go to the Eels and play alongside Mitch Moses. I'm telling you, you're not going to play alongside Mitch Moses, the last Origin winning half, and be the first choice half. It's just, you're going to go in there and take Dylan Brown's role. The reality of this is his manager's told him he can go and get more money elsewhere. And while I don't begrudge him that, the timing and the way it's been, occurring, well, you're a Tigers fan. They've just had a great win against the Knights on the weekend, got their season a little bit back on the line. They're, around the edge of the top 8. They're in the contention. And he's sitting there and going, I don't want to be second fiddle to someone else. I want to be a first choice half. You're a kid. You buy your time. We just wait to the end of the season and get the deal done if that's what you need to do. Or, you'd love it in a world where they can go and have their negotiation. We saw this in the AFL the other day. Get it done and then announce it at the end of the season. But again, way too many loose lips that sink ships, as we saw in the AFL, Brodie.
Yeah, that was a funny one, wasn't it? Catching up for a coffee when there's that many Zoom interviews you could do. And I mean, isn't that what you actually pay managers, to negotiate, not yourself? I mean, come on, how stupid can you be?
Brodie, you got to go and test the coffee in person and see if it's any good. Make sure that's good coffee. That's don't worry about the fact they're going to pay you $200,000 more, and you can probably, throw some of that into a cafe. Anyway, we'll move along. Something that some West Tigers fans might be interested in trying as a spectator this weekend at Lachie Galvin, although we're here playing New South Wales Cup, is lobbing water bottles at people. Apparently that's a thing in cycling now. We saw a fan in the Paris-Roubaix Classic, the much famed, much vaunted race where they race across cobblestones, and this fan, and Lachie, you've got to kind of really drill into the video, and I don't know that we've got the video at the moment, but you've really got to drill into that video. He just end over end. It's like the bottle toss that people like to do where they try and land it on its end. He didn't bottle toss it to land it on its end. He bottle tossed to clean up the leader's chin.
Yeah, it's good technique, right? Good end over end. Nice kick, helps it go in a straight line. It's good form, but it's always been one of those things with cycling races, right? You want those kind of fans and those straights to be really packed in to, get a really good look on camera as you're driving up. But just inevitably every kind of year we see one of these clips. Obviously this one was quite intentional. Sometimes unintentionally it happens where people are just driving into, running into the cyclists and making them fall over. So luckily, it didn't have a massive effect on the race. It was a bit of a knock to the head, which obviously, isn't that fun, but didn't knock him off his bike or anything, which is good. But I don't know. The story is that he's handed himself in, but he's clearly gone to some lengths to hide himself from the camera so he wouldn't be spotted. So I don't know, maybe he had a change of heart after it went pretty bad.
Yeah, well, Brodie, look, for Mathieu Van der Poel, didn't impact it too much. He made it 3 of these races on the trot. I've got a bit of a question about anyone who's a specialist on a race that's primarily run over cobblestones, because he's got some real butt calluses going on. It's Pogacar, who's one of the Tour de France defending champion. He's an absolute superstar. He fell late in the race, and it was his first attempt. He'd been hinting at it for years that he was going to give this a go. Cobblestone's not for him, not for me either. But Mathieu Van der Poel, cobblestones don't stop him, flying water bowls don't stop him. He is just continuing on. So 3 in a row, but it could have been much more serious. As Lachie said, we see it sometimes the humorous side where people accidentally run out, don't realise that the pack's coming through and nearly get cleaned up by a roving horde of push bike riders. But this is it's a brain snap from the fan.
What goes on in your mind of thinking, this is a big event. Obviously, there's going to be cameras on. I'm just going to do this. Like, what goes through your head as a fan to think, yeah, this is a great idea. This would be funny. Yeah, I'll do this. Like, seriously, we've seen some dumb things that, a lot of people do at sports events. Like, it's probably one of the most popular, places other than schoolies for, these things to sort of happen. But seriously, it is absolutely stupid. And it's a lot more dangerous than, yes, he probably got away with it, but it's seriously dangerous. Like, these bikes, they're so thin, you're going a lot faster than what it looks on the telly. I mean, you see some of the stacks, you see some of the rips, the Lycra, it's about paper thin. So once they do fall, it's pretty serious, unfortunately. But yeah, look, it's all well and good to sort of laugh about it now, but it could have been a lot worse off if something did seriously happen.
Yeah, fortunately, it's all well that ends well, I guess. But yeah, as you say, he's just tossing that bottle out in front. But if that cyclist coming along at, 30, 40 kilometres an hour, that's basically throwing something at someone at 40 kilometres an hour that weighs half a kilo, and that can do some real damage. But as we said, it has ended well. But I think the Venn diagrams of people that do toolies and people who do dumb shit at sporting is probably hot. Whether it's throwing sand buckets at the A-League, throwing bottles here, or, as we saw with the West Tigers fans on the weekend, punching on because they obviously knew that Lachlan Galvin was leaving the club. But anyway, I don't know if anyone saw that. We saw some of them escorted out, one of them covered in blood. It was just, football fans at their worst. And fans, just pull your heads in. Let's be a little bit smarter. So fans and agents both need an uppercut by the sound of this. Moving on to something that doesn't need an uppercut, Brodie, and you were front and centre for this. Gather round. A success again this year, mate. Some tweaks to it this year. We saw a very well produced footy show, mate. I think that's where it all started.
Yeah, that was honestly brilliant to be down there in the Barossa last Tuesday night. I mean, it's always a big risk hosting one of these big outdoor sporting events and shows, but the weather turned it on. It was absolutely perfect. I mean, unfortunately, Barossa, like a lot of places in WA and South Australia at the moment, very dry. But I mean, it was an absolutely brilliant weekend, starting with that show. But look, Adelaide come alive, mate. I haven't seen. It was like, we just mentioned schoolies, but it was like schoolies for footy fans. I mean, it had something for everyone. Kids, there was a festival of footy. I mean, there at one stage you could zip line across the river to Adelaide Oval if you didn't want to walk across the bridge. They had player signings. They had games on and just about had functions in every single pub, but at the same time, it didn't feel overcrowded, because you had it out at Norwood, you had it down, a few games down in the Barossa. You had, your 5 games at Adelaide Oval, and it was just brilliant, mate. Peter Malinauskas, the Premier here in South Australia, it's very rare in politics to find 95% of the population in the state to absolutely love a bloke, whether you're a Liberal, whether you're Labor, whether you're Greens. Everyone loves this guy. And it's so rare you see that. And I swear there must have been 2 or 3. He must have had body doubles over the weekend because he was at every single function I worked at. And, there was a lot of overlap. And I was thinking, how is this bloke here? But it was an absolutely brilliant weekend, mate. Definitely finished well. Port Adelaide and Hawthorn, obviously, if the AFL don't refund Ken Hinkley's fine, I mean, they've got hundreds of $1,000s of promotion, yet they still want to slug Ken Hinkley, $20,000 for an airplane gesture when people are getting $1,000 or $5,000 for flipping the bird, mate. You tell me what's going on here.
Yeah, there's some questions to be answered there in terms of Lachie, from your point of view. Taking it in from, the home of AFL, if you will. They'll tell you it's a national game now, but Victoria's still the heartbeat where the majority of the clubs come from. It looks like a raging success. The AFL ladder might suggest that Victoria are not doing quite as well as they might like to be doing, with the rugby league seats holding the top 3 spots, though.
Oh, look, Gather Round is awesome. I think ever since it came in, it's been a massive success. From a soccer perspective, we look at it with great jealousy and compare it to what Unite Round has been in the A-League. And, it's undeniable that just the atmosphere, the popularity around Gather Round, the perfect location choice in Adelaide, it is the place that makes the most sense to host this kind of event. We're talking about the Port Hawthorn game. It's very clever marketing from the AFL, something that they were, going to cash in on, which David Koch made very clear over the weekend as well. That was not a Port Adelaide game. That was an AFL game that they managed to take home the revenue for that. So all the more reason for the $20,000 refund, I reckon. But no, Gather Round, it's grown year on year since they've introduced it. It's been a great initiative, and it's clear that it has a great amount of support and popularity behind it. So, big success for me.
Yeah, it certainly looks like it. There were some stories that did appear out of Gather Round, most of them results-based, but the one I do want to just get a little bit of an opinion from you on, Broads, as a South Australian. A little bit of drama from a certain player posting something on Instagram against his old club, a little drive-by, and then it's disappeared. There's going to be some heat on Willie Rioli. I don't think we need to delve too much into the history of it, but again, it's just, as much as there might be some underlying issues there, the fact that it's been deleted and now he's been given a little bit of time off probably suggests that it wasn't. It was a little ill-advised in terms of a way to go about things. Posting a vent or a rant on Instagram when you're a public figure never tends to go too well.
No, it doesn't. And we all know Willie has had his troubles in the past, but look, I think it comes down to it. A few things. Yes, he shouldn't have done that, but the racial abuse he did cop online, this one absolutely unacceptable. And it's something that, we as fans need to get a hell of a lot better at. I mean, it's absolutely disgraceful, to send, AFL players, rugby players, NBA players, these hateful messages online. I think in the end, yes, this was directed at the Hawthorn Football Club, but I think it was really set off by a lot of these comments he received. Unfortunately, in his Instagram bio and in his Instagram story. And look, I loved what he did. Can I just say, like, showing the bowl, a bit of cheekiness with everything that's sort of been built up in the week, with Ginnivan saying he had this, he had a celebration planned and never kicked a goal. I loved it. And it's moments like this in footy that it captures, the attention. And, similar to any sport, when you have these little rivalries and these little storylines in games, it's what we want as fans. And we don't want to become, sports fans or media and then, really cast a bad eye on what he did. I loved what he did. I think, if you do want to slam it, do it. If you're out there playing, you want to give him a bit of grief, do it. But that's where it stops. As soon as that siren goes, let's cut it there. From Willie's point of view, from the fans' point of view, from everyone else. Let's just build it up properly, enjoy it for what it is, and I want to see more of moments like that in sport.
Yeah, I do like the build-up. I think it's doing it the right way sometimes, and it is a fine line, right? It's a fine art, and, again, it comes back to that point about management and support and being given the right direction and shepherding with it, because it does. It builds headlines, Look, the guy on my shirt, Gunther Steiner, the character he is. These sorts of people, we want characters, and then a lot of people don't want them to be characters. When they start being characters, you can't really win. We talked about it. And there's some players, we look at the tennis, Nick Kyrgios has, stepped over the line. Sometimes Bernard Tomic ran, skipped and jumped. Funny. But, again, I think Willie's probably, he's probably put a foot over the line. And again, I credit the club on giving him a day off afterwards to try and wrap it back up and, bringing the post down. But it is a fine line. I think we need some passion. We need some, personality in our sport. But it is about just making sure they execute it at, I guess, the right way, Lachie, and build it up. But to Brodie's point, there shouldn't be any messages, racist or not, that are of a negative, derogatory nature going to players in regards to things that they do on the field or things that they do directed towards other players. If a player's got an issue with it or a club has an issue with how a player behaves towards them, that's for the club or the player to respond. They don't need, Johnny Keyboard Warrior at home sitting there thinking he's 6 foot tall and bulletproof from an anonymous Instagram profile sending a message or blowing up because, Paddy Cripps only got 15 disposals instead of 18 and he had him over 17 and a half.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's 2 points to that question, right? The first is the kind of abuse side, and obviously that has no place in sport, in footy, in Australian society as a whole. I think there was some comments from someone from the AFLPA after this whole incident, and part of it was like, what feels like for the 1,000th time we're asking, so-called fans of football not to abuse players because of their race online. It's like, yes, this has really happened 1,000 times. That's the reality of what we're dealing with here. And to some extent, the AFL has to be better at this. We have the Sir Doug Nichols rounds, which brings great awareness, but obviously, it's not a solved issue by any stretch of the imagination, right? So that's one part of it. The second part on personality is another one where I think the AFL have a lot to answer for. I mean, how much longer are you going to sit on the fence? And again, we're going to bring it back up, but fine Ken Hinkley $20,000 and then promote the hell out of Port Adelaide v Hawthorn as the marquee slot and gather round. So you can't have your cake it and eat it too. You got to pick one way. Do you want to promote these kind of rivalries and really build up the animosity, which does drive a lot of the attention that sits on the game? At the moment, I feel like they're just trying to be, sitting in the back seat, be a little bit hidden, a little bit secret, and kind of just let things happen and feel like they're, at least in the public eye, giving some people a slap on the wrist when it feels like they have to, when that's the, quote unquote right thing to do, but then benefit from it later on. So they got to get off the fence somewhere and decide what they want to do.
As much as I hate that statement of not having your cake and eat it too, because I don't know what else you'd bloody do with a cake. But anyway, I think we've found a third circle for our Venn diagram, lads, of people that send Instagram messages, go to toolies and do stupid shit at sporting events. I think there's a nice...
And rugby league fans.
Whoa.
Yes, there we go.
There might be a little bit of overlap there, but, hey, AFL showed us this too this week, and your football fans throwing buckets. I don't think I've seen that at many other sporting events like you. But, look, at the end of the day, I don't think they're really sporting fans, any of the ones that are really doing this. They're just idiots. They're morons, and they need to pull their head in and go and find somewhere else to do it. Maybe they can get in a room with each other and yell at each other. That might be a better way of their time. But, yeah, again, no more. We need to cut it out. Doesn't matter whether it's gender, race, sexuality, or any other piece, or they just didn't get your multi up. It's just not on. These guys are doing a job. I'd love to go into some of these places, these people's workplaces, and just give them some feedback on how they do their job. Geez, that could be fun. Let's look back at the video series.
It's a great content idea.
Jacob Brown there, and he can really critique their work from Round Ball Australia. He'll get right amongst it. But thank you, boys, for covering it off. We've got in depth on a few things here today. It's been really good. Look forward to talking a little bit of football with you later in the show, Lachie, and we might get you coming back to talk to us about championship belts and the Volk and a bit more at the back end of the show, Broads.
Sounds good, mate.
Cheers, Chris.
Well, now that we've headed around the grounds with the lads, we'll give them a moment to rest up and dodge any stray water bottles, and we'll head to the NBA, and it is heating up over in the US as basketball season comes to its pinnacle and its peak. So we've gone to an aficionado of the orange ball, of the Spalding, if you will, Ben Dunn, NBA superfan. Dunny, welcome to the show.
G'day, mate. How you going?
Going well, mate. As we can see there, mate, a Miami Heat fan. Just fall into that camp, which is, a little bit bittersweet at the moment. It's a bit tough, but I guess to start things off, let's just talk through the framework. Because there are a lot of people that are used to their AFL, their NRL, other traditional final systems. We have it in the NBL as well, but the NBA have this wonderful play-in tournament that sees the teams that essentially they're fighting for 7th and 8th spot, even though they might have finished 9th and 10th, and they play their way through, and only 2 teams get into then playoffs after the play-in.
Correct. Yes, they changed the format up a few years back now just to try and de-incentivize tanking and make it more attractive for teams to make the playoffs. So they created this play-in tournament. So if you're hovering around that sort of 7 to 10 spot, then you can still have a chance at making the playoffs and therefore, I guess, getting more revenue for your franchise and having a bit of extra engagement, which I think has worked pretty well. It's been pretty successful so far, and there's definitely been some drama out of it the last couple of years. So I think it's working, and I enjoy it, although my team being in it the last couple of years is not that enjoyable. I'd much prefer that they already sorted something out. But anyway, here we go.
I guess it means instead of having 8 teams in some sort of playoffs or play-ins, you've now got 10, which does draw a bit more interest. And yeah, Miami's a great example. This year they finished 10th. It was interesting this year, though, the East especially. It was kind of determined about 7 or 8 games before the end, so it didn't really add that extra excitement towards the end. The West ran a bit closer, but again, there was, I think if memory serves, about a 3-game gap back between Dallas and Phoenix. So I guess, yeah, as I said, a little bit more liveliness, but walk us through now what happens from here. As you can see on there, we've got the West and the East. The 6 teams there that have finished in the top 6, they put their feet up. They've got the good little break now leading into finals. But the team 7 to 10, how does it shape up and how do they go from here?
Sure. So 7 and 8 playoff, they're the only ones that I guess are guaranteed 2 bites of the cherry. So the winner of 7 and 8 goes straight through, and they get the 7th seeding. So they'll play the number 2 team, and then the loser of that game plays the winner of 9 and 10. So once the 9 and 10 game's done, the 10th team drops out, which I unfortunately think will beat Miami from the East this year, and then. Not to spoil what we're going to talk about later. It's just a pessimist in me coming out. So, yeah, it creates that little bit of, I guess, extra competition, a bit more intensity in sort of the playoffs. And I think it helps some of those lesser teams come in a bit more playoff hardened. So I think it adds a little bit of context and benefit for those teams that may have been sort of struggling throughout the regular season. They get that playoff environment, even though it's only a 1, maybe 2 game sample, but they play at that higher intensity, which I think helps them once they hit the rounds.
Yeah, so when we go live to air, noting that we're recording this the night before, the 7 and 8 games will be decided. So the 7th seed will have gone through. So in the West, it'll either be Memphis or Golden State. In the East, Orlando or Atlanta. To essentially the games as well for the 9 and 10. Those elimination games will happen as well. And then it'll be down to that last game, which will be playing off for the 8th seed, the loser of 7 and 8, 9 and 10. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. Historically, and again, I'm probably putting you on the spot here, do we understand, has there been many teams that have managed to get through the play-in and then make a bit of a run into the playoffs, or is it just those extra games end up being, remembering that they've played an 82-game season and then, we're going into best of final series? Have we had much luck out of those teams coming out of the play-ins?
Actually, in this, you've set me up perfectly. I think the only team to come from 8 and make the finals was the Miami Heat a couple of years ago with Jimmy Butler when we went on that crazy run, took out the Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals and got all the way through. But I think that's the only time it's been done without having to jump on the Google web right now and check it out. But yeah, I don't think traditionally, even in the old formats, the 7, 8 seeds never really made it through very often.
So on that, again, I'll put you on the spot. Let's have a look at how it shapes up. Who do you see getting through these at the moment? Who's your pick? And again, it'll be out of date, I guess. But who's the 2 teams? We'll know one by the time we go to air. But who's the 2 teams that you think should get through? Is it a matter of it should be 7 and 8 straight up, or is there one of the 9 and 10s that you think's got a bit of danger about them?
No, I think it'll be 7 and 8 straight up who are going to go through. The only probable exception, I think, will be the Kings. I don't think the Mavs really have the depth there. They've done pretty well to recover from trading Luka, but I just don't think that they have got the bench depth to cover what the Kings are going to throw at them. And then I'm pretty sure Golden State are going to go through. They're my pick, so I think they'll do it. And then Memphis is going to easily take care of whoever's next. Memphis are on quite a run at the moment with Jar coming back. So, yeah, I think it's going to be the 7 and 8. Chicago is going to dust Miami, and then because they've beaten us all year, and we just don't have that third scoring option. And then I think Atlanta, they're going to take care of them and get that 8 seed.
Okay, so we've got Orlando going through on that metric, and Golden State, they'll play,
yep.
And Houston relevant on either side.
Yep.
We're expecting that Memphis and Atlanta will come through into those second spots, and they'll take on the red-hot OKC and Cleveland, who've been the dominant teams this season. I guess if you're an Aussie fan, there's a bit of a soft spot for Chicago. They were the hot team to follow in the 90s, and they're hot again with Josh Giddey and all he's doing there. So that'd be a nice little story for a few Aussie fans if they could sneak their way through. But it's going to be, as you said, I think they'll do a job on Miami reasonably comfortably, but then they're going to have a big task against likely Atlanta, but possibly Orlando.
Yeah, I think you're right. And there's also the Australian connection with the Great Barrier Thief, Dyson Daniels, over on the Hawks there. So I think either way, we're set up for an Aussie doing pretty well in round one. But yeah, I just can't see. Again, it's going to come down to a depth with Chicago because they've had a couple of injuries. They trade away DeRozan and then Levine, and they're really, really reliant on Vucevic and Giddey to sort of create some stuff. Kobe White's been really hot and cold the last few weeks, and they've been trying to pull stuff out of their bench, but I don't know how long that can continue, particularly in the pressure cooker that the playoffs create. So I just think that Atlanta's going to have them covered pretty easy.
Let's move on to the next step because that'll start to be the next shape is those first round of playoffs.
Yep.
Allowing those are the teams that go through. The thing I note is in theoretical form in terms of streaks, the two number 5 seeds are the ones that are in the best of form at the moment. Both Milwaukee and LA Clippers come in, I think, on 8-game winning streaks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the Bucks are going to get over the Pacers. I think that's my real only upset in the Eastern Conference. And look, the Nuggets seem to be cratering. Like, Jokic has been going so well, and I'll be really surprised if he doesn't get another MVP. Like, his stats are phenomenal. Finished the season averaging a triple-double, pretty crazy. But he's just got no one really contributing around him at the moment. He's a one-man band, and so I think if the Clippers can continue and Kawhi can stay healthy, they'll go through.
All right, so we're suggesting that it's pretty much going to be 2 form and 2 stripped outside of maybe the Clippers and the Bucks. Do you see either of those sides then challenging when it comes to that next round? I know we're looking a long way down and we're talking about health of teams, but those number 1 seeds have just been phenomenal this season in terms of the pace that they've set. You look at the Thunder, I think they finished 15 or 16 games clear at the top of the West. In the East, it wasn't quite as much of a runaway for the Cavs from everyone, but the Cavs and the Celtics were a long way clear, and most people are sort of expecting that it's sort of a 3-horse race between those teams.
Yeah, look, I don't see anyone else taking it out. The Rockets are a good story, but again, they got so much youth on their side. I just think that the old adage, you got to lose one to win one. So I think this is the year, like back in the day with the old Oklahoma City Thunder when they had Harden and Durant and Westbrook came through, took on that sort of red hot Golden State team before then the next year actually making the finals and losing to the Heat. I think they've got to follow a sort of similar format. I just they can't go from a lottery pick team to a championship team. I just don't see it happening without a little bit more experience, water under the bridge. So yeah, I don't see them really going through. I think it is OKC, and I'm predicting that the Cavs will get through. But the Celtics, it's a big ask to get over the Celtics because of their championship pedigree. And they've got probably a little bit more depth than the Cavs do. And look, playoffs bring along a lot of stuff for NBA teams. The game seems to slow down a little bit, gets more into the half court, and those rotations seem to shorten up. And most coaches will go with sort of an 8-man rotation just to make sure that they've got their best players on the court at the whole time. So I still think that is edge might go to the Cavs a little bit because the Celtics are still relying on Al Horford, who's older than me, and a couple of those sorts of guys to sort of get them through. And I just think there's going to be a bit too much enthusiasm, and Donovan Mitchell is playing out of his skin. So if Garland can get back and get contributing how he was with Mobley, Jared Allen, Max Strus, like I just think that they're going to really stretch the Celtics, and I think it's their time.
And in terms of that, again, does that play into OKC's hands, assuming that they get through a little cleaner? If they get through in, say, 5, they take a 4-1 in the Western Conference Finals, and then, Boston and Cleveland, irrespective of who comes through, they beat each other up a little bit, which is what we're expecting. And again, playoffs will always throw up something. There'll be someone who will, even if we're tipping them to win in 7, they might, all of a sudden get a bit of a jump and get a sweep. But if that's the way it plays out, do you see then that really levers open that window even further for this dominant OKC team?
Yeah, absolutely, because they're going to have to go through the Bucks, then the Celtics. Like they're playing against some really strong, solid teams with those front courts. It's going to be a bit of a grind for them to get through. And OKC is just going to play them off the court. I think the pace that they play with at the moment, the options that they have, like they can go swing three, like they get back on D so quick. Yeah, I think it's OKC's to lose this year for sure.
Well, there we go. I'm the same, so that probably means there's absolutely no chance.
The way I've been gambling lately, yeah, 100%.
What's the legal disclaimer about gamble responsibly and don't listen? All right, well, so that's that. We're suggesting that it's probably going to come down to OKC versus the Cavs, or maybe OKC versus Boston if they can get their few aging pieces together. In terms of the individual awards, SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, is almost an unbackable favourite in a lot of people's views in terms of the MVP. You talked about Nikola Jokic as well. Is it a two-horse race, that award? Nikola's finished in the back end of the year. I know, you talked about Donovan Mitchell, Jason Tatum, the Greek Freak are going to be in the conversation, but who do you see the voters sitting with when it comes to MVP this year?
It's going to be the top two for sure. It's going to be SGA and Jokic. Jokic's advanced metrics, all his stats are incredible. But I think it's going to come down to that voter fatigue. The same thing that plagued Jordan, the same thing that's plagued LeBron. They just don't want to vote for the guy again. He should get it. But I think the fact that OKC finished so far in front of everyone, that's going to count for SGA. Plus, he's the best player on that team. So, yeah, I think he'll get it. But I think it definitely should be Jokic.
All right. Now, one to finish with for the Aussie fans, the DPOY, the Defensive Player of the Year. If you ask a lot of people this in late January, early February, Draymond Green was sitting well and truly in the box seat. You talked about the Great Barrier Thief before, Dyson Daniels. He was strong early in the year. He's been absolutely phenomenal late in the year. The steals and everything else that he's throwing down, he set some crazy records in terms of getting to some milestones throughout the back end of the season. There's some people now talking that there may be a chance, even though he's not the style of player that would traditionally win this, he is now right in that race alongside Draymond Green and maybe even looking at that OKC dominance, Lou Dort as well.
Yeah, and I think there was talk of Jaren Jackson Jr. being in there as well. Look, the last time that there was a carry away steals leader like there has been now was Gary Payton, way back in the day playing for the Supersonics, and he got Defensive Player of the Year, like one of the first times a guard had ever won it. So the precedent is there, and I would really like to see him win it. The one that looks like he definitely is going to win as Most Improved Player, because he's pretty much an unbackable favourite in that one now as well. But look, if he could pull off both, that would be great. But the NBA being the NBA, they're probably only going to allow him to take one trophy with him. But I'd love for him to get both. And I think he's definitely shown, like he's a massive reason that the Hawks are even in the playoff or the play-in, is because of his success and being able to sort of be that perfect backcourt tandem with Trae Young. So Trae Young doesn't have to worry about the defense anymore. He can just get up and down the court. He can get his shots up. He can move the ball around. And they leave the heavy guarding to Dyson, and he's done so well with it. He's defended all the best players all year and still racked up these incredible steals numbers. So, yeah, I think he definitely deserves it.
Well, Ben, a big thank you to you. Before we go, mate, any other tips for any of the other awards? Any other thoughts on those? I know we've got plenty. They give out plenty of them, from first team through Rookie of the Year. Obviously, that'll be focused on the Defensive Player and the Most Improved. But anyone else you want to shout out before we wrap up, mate?
Who else do I want to shout out? Look, it'd be remiss of me to not give a push for all rookie first team for Kel'el Ware. He managed to crack the Heat starting lineup for the last sort of 15, 20 games of the year, and there's been a walking double-double. He's changed the way that they've sort of started playing, and part of the reason that we went on that mini run and had that sort of 5 or 6 games that got us back into sort of being in that playing position, because otherwise we were no hope. I think he should definitely be up there and probably over an adopted Australian and Alex Sarr, who played with Perth last year and went on to play for the Wizards. So I think he should be there. So let's hopefully those with votes are listening to me and we get him up there.
And it would certainly be a one to watch. We'll keep an eye out for it, all those as the season winds on as well. And as you said, obviously Dyson Daniels is in that race with Braun for that most improved player. We'll wait and see what comes of it. Lots of basketball. It's heating up. Unfortunately, not for us, we don't think. But hey, Miami have surprised people before, as you said.
Yeah, that's right.
Buck the script. They've got the form for it. But, mate, we might get you back in a couple of weeks as this really gets towards the pinnacle. But a big thank you today, mate. I think you've given us a really good insight for all of our fans. And in the meantime, go Heat, and hopefully we don't look silly signing off with that.
Too easy. Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.
Moving on from the bouncing round balls, well, to another bouncing round ball, but using the feet, not the hands this time. From the basketball to the soccer, and when we talk soccer or football, as he'd much prefer it to be called, we call on Lachlan Avil from Round Ball Australia. Really the one true home of A-League these days, mate.
Yeah, it's a couple of other colleagues, shall we call them, dropping off a little bit, but I guess that's just kind of the state we're in at the moment.
Round Ball Australia soldiers on, lots of free football content to keep you up to date with what's happening domestically and a bit more abroad as well. Mate, speaking of abroad, let's start on the broader soccer news, and a little concerning, Mary Fowler copping a knock for Man City this week, which had a lot of hearts in mouths for Aussies. Yeah,
it's a little bit worrying, isn't it? I think the news fresh out, obviously going down with a knee straight away, you think ACL, which is not great news for the Matildas heading into an Asian Cup at the start of next season. That would almost definitely rule her out now. But I believe the initial reports back from the club were that it's not as bad as maybe it looked on the field. So obviously we never like to see someone injured, and especially a player as talented as Mary Fowler is. But hopefully that recovery isn't quite as bad as an ACL, and we'd still get to see a run around in Australia for that Asian Cup next year.
We're certainly hoping. We don't want another Sam Kerr Olympics situation. So we'll wait and see what comes of it. All the best with Mary. But as you say, like, they've talked about it being not as bad, but it's still a little vague as to what's actually happening. So hopefully we'll have some more updates in the coming days and know a little bit more by the time we get together again next week. But that was kind of the big headline article for me. There's obviously a lot still going on with the European football and stuff, and we talked on that a little bit last week. So we might hold on that thought for now and sort of loop back to it when it gets a bit more to the pointy end with the leagues and the cups over there in Europe. But let's head domestic now and turn our focus onto where our core sits with the A-League. And Auckland, they've got 3 games. They've got sort of a 4-point gap at the moment. The Premiership starting to look a little nervy. But realistically, if they can get 6 points from these 3 games, then they'll be home and host.
Yeah, they will. And, it's a big game against Melbourne Victory this weekend, but then you look at the fixture and they go and get to host Perth Glory, right? So you're thinking they're at least wrapping up 3 points there. And then their direct competition, Western United, dropped off this weekend as well. So Melbourne City now in that second place. They have a tough run of fixtures as well, playing Sydney FC. And I reckon there's someone else, maybe the Wanderers in that top kind of bracket as well. So we've been saying this for weeks, right? They've kind of been drawing games and dropping off a little bit, but I still think the points total that, the gap that they've amassed will be enough. And given their fixture compared to those around them as well, I think they'll still have enough to get it done. Just
taking it down to the wire, keeping it exciting for us, Lachie. We like to see that. Speaking of Melbourne Victory, you touched on them as well. They're just creeping up there. That congestion's building. Those top 5 are, especially second to fifth. I think I tend to sit with you because, despite what Adelaide did last week, Auckland should claim 3 points against Perth. It's a scenario there where those other 4 sides, and 3 of them, the Victorian sides, are all just nipping at each other. And, the difference between finishing second and fifth is fairly impactful when it comes to finals.
Yeah, you got obviously the second place will get a bye through the first week, so they get to skip the elimination finals. And then they'll be able to host the second leg of the semi-final, which is massive. Of course, we talked about the Asian Champions League elite spot with Auckland being up top. That will fall to second place. And there's a number of teams that have a genuine chance of winning it. Melbourne City, obviously, with the advantage now, but they also have a tough fixture list. You actually, even though they're 4 points behind, the Wanderers and Melbourne Victory both have to be considered as potential winners of that spot as well. Victory, if they manage to get a win at home to Auckland this weekend, which you wouldn't consider out of the realm of possibility given the two form lines, then they've got the Bulls and the Jets, I think, in the final round. So that's a softer run-in compared to someone, as I say, like City, who have to play the Sky Blues. The Wanderers also have to play Melbourne City, but then they also have the Jets and Bulls behind them. So those two teams, they have big ones this weekend to kind of just, edge up towards that second place and then a softer run home. So even though it is a 4-point gap and there is only 3 games left, I still think anyone in that top 5 can really crack that top 2.
Well, that gives us a nice little segue because that is certainly starting to really congest. But then 6th place, we know Sydney had that draw on the weekend. Adelaide slipped up against Perth, and the thing that really hurt about that is what it did to their goal difference as well. But Newcastle, you want to say that Newcastle might be easy to play. The second half of Newcastle's season, when you look at it, they've equalled their club's undefeated streak. They've equalled their club's biggest winning margin in a game in their history. The second half of their season, when you take that in isolation, and obviously you can't really do that in a season, and then consider that they're well outside the finals at the moment, and their coach isn't going to have a job next year potentially, well, certainly not in Newcastle. It's quite bizarre, but again, I'm ever the optimist. 38 points. They only need 3 wins from here, and they come up against Sydney this weekend. And, speaking of people taking a chance, Ryan Scott, JR, worked some magic there on Jim Carey. Ryan Scott took a chance when Noah James wore one to the side of the head a couple of weeks ago. So, theoretically, it's still possible. I think it's a bit of a dream, a pipe dream for Newcastle fans, but never say never.
No chance. Absolutely zero. They have Sydney FC, Western Sydney, and Melbourne Victory to close off their season. 3 teams that all have a lot to prove and plenty on the table. And yes, you can take, the second half of their season and look at the amount of wins they got and that club record streak that they broke, which is true. But then you look at their last 4 games and they've got a loss against Western United and Wellington Phoenix, who have not been playing good football, a draw with the Bulls, and then a 6-0 win against a 10-man Central Coast Mariners side. So it depends which, kind of category of games you want to look at.
Go back one more game from that and tell me what happened. Isn't that Melbourne sitting their backs against the wall in Melbourne, their second game in 4 days?
Yeah, backs against the wall against a nobody crowd with not much atmosphere. Doesn't really feel like an away game. So,
cold, my friend. Crowd cold. So, all right then, you're saying there's no chance. Is that what you're telling me? What sort of, what are you prepared to put on the line here, Lachie?
Mate, you want strong opinions. I'm telling you, the Newcastle Jets won't be playing finals football this year. Not only do they have to win what will have to be all of those games, but they also have to rely on the teams above them not getting points. So what is it? It's a 5-point gap to Sydney FC. So you want to make up 5 points in 3 rounds with 3 of the best teams in the competition. Good luck.
So let's say Newcastle beat Sydney this weekend. It's 2 points then.
Yeah, but probably not, because the Bulls and Adelaide United are in there as well. The Adelaide play host to Wellington Phoenix, and the Bulls are coming up against the Mariners.
Adelaide that lost to Perth. The Bulls may be against the Mariners, but look, I'm just saying there's a chance. I'm happy to take a wager of long odds if you're suggesting that, you're telling me it's impossible. So what price does that give me?
10-1.
Oh dear, your idea of impossible is 10%. Anyway, we'll move on from that. No, well, look, I think it's highly unlikely. I think it's highly improbable, but wow, wouldn't it be a story, I think, is the key piece. Sydney in the box seat, I agree. All they need to do realistically is a win against the Jets this weekend, and it'll all but ice where they sit. They've got goal difference and points on Adelaide. MacArthur, as you touched on before, play a couple of the contenders on their run home. Yes, they've got Central Coast this weekend. I expect Central Coast will bounce back a little, but again, it should be 3 points for MacArthur and lock in those 4 teams that are going to Darwin. But that's our matches this weekend. Obviously, Melbourne Victory, Auckland, and Western Sydney, Melbourne City. They're, finals preview matches, essentially, those 2 games. They're teams that should be well and truly there when the whips are cracking.
Yep, a little bit of dress rehearsal for final series, chasing the top 2. As we've said, I think the Wanderers will feel fairly comfortable that they have locked up finals football by now. You look at the likes of, Western United travelling up to Brisbane. That'll, hopefully just be a little bit of a steadying of the ship for them. Adelaide, Wellington is a bit of a nothing one, really. What else have we got? Mariners, Bulls. Yeah. So, look, we're at that kind of the phase of the season now where we kind of know who's going to be in and around it. So we're just kind of warming up. We're waiting for this big climax to the season to happen. Obviously, you mentioned Darwin before. We know now that those bottom 4 teams are actually going to be playing during the final series in those Australia Cup playoffs. So they'll have to wait another couple of weeks to go on holiday after their pitiful seasons wrap up in the end. So a little bit of saving face to do there. But yeah, this is just another little teaser, another little build up until we get to the main event in a few weeks' time.
Well, someone actually raised that point with me on Sunday when I was at an NPL game. They said, geez, you really need to feel for Perth and Brisbane because they probably booked in their off-season holidays quite a while ago, and now they might be going away for a week only to come back and play some more football. So they can't let their hair down too much, otherwise it's really going to show.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it will be fun games because there is going to be a point of pride on the line here. There's going to be an element of players. I wonder how the contract. Oh no, the contract is be fine because it's till July anyway. But proving yourself, proving your worth for next season. A lot of those fringe players that are maybe off contract, that's one last chance to impress. If the Jets manage to fall down, or other coaches that maybe other coaches that might not be there next season, that's one more game as well. Do you for a Wellington Phoenix that are very close to deciding whether Giancarlo Italiano will be there next season, do they make that call before or after these playoffs and put someone new in? I don't know. So as much as these kind of games has usually been just looked upon as some kind of meaningless preseason games up in Darwin, which they have been for the most part, there is a little bit more at stake, it feels like, with those games. So it should be a bit of fun.
A question I've got for you without notice, because that's what I like to do to you guys when you come on here. Cup tying.
As in players?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a fascinating one, isn't it?
There's a lot of these players, especially in underperforming teams. These teams that have finished at the bottom of the ladder will let go half a dozen or more of these players, and they'll end up more than likely either at other A-League clubs or at high-level NPL clubs that are a chance of being in the round of 32. So,
yeah, that's a very good question. I think
you're out the door. If that is the case, would you be declining to play? Anyway, we're just throwing more cats amongst the pigeons here.
The smart thing to do would be to put something in the regulations that say the playoffs don't count towards cap tying players because they literally take part in a different season for these A-League clubs. That would be the smart thing to do. Whether that's actually been done is a different question that I don't have the answer to.
And I'm going to leave this very broad because I don't want to get anyone in particular aside, but smart and sports administration are not often things that go hand in hand. And the other thing is, right, like players who are getting releases who might be on a contract, but let's just say that you're at Perth and you get a release and you've got an opportunity to go and play for Newcastle. If I'm Perth, even if they do have that in there, I'm saying, well, we're happy to release you under your current contract, but you can't play against us in the Cup for Newcastle. Things like that. So there might be some of those. You see those in some of the other sporting codes. So that could be a little intriguing play out as well if they're not Cup tied, but it might be something that we send off to an APL, but that's not an APL. It's a Football Australia. So we might suss out that through our contacts there and work out if we can get an update on that. And maybe that can be a Round Ball Australia conversation. I think that's probably more in your realm than our not slightly more nonsensical side here.
Well, one other little nugget that this could actually influence is that if Sydney FC manage to make it to what will be the semi-finals, right, and they make it to the final of the ACL2 competition, which our viewers will know by now, then what's going to happen is the final of that competition will be played on the Sunday of the first leg of those semi-finals. Obviously, the AFC position won't change. That game will be played on that Sunday. So the APL then have to move one of the legs of the semi-finals as Sydney FC are playing in it. Now, from what I understand, the most logical thing to do would be to move it to the week before, so midweek, which happens to be when Football Australia have now scheduled these Australia Cup playoff games in Darwin. So I'm sure some of the benefit for the Darwin kind of tourism is that, all the kind of football eyes will be on them during these 2 days. But I think there's a distinct possibility that there's going to be a very important A-League match on the same night if Sydney FC make it that far.
So just to confirm the dates for these playoff games?
Tuesday and Wednesday, the 13th and 14th of May, I think it is.
And so Sydney won't be able to play Thursday.
Yeah.
And the venues and travel and things will be booked for Tuesday and Wednesday by the time we know. Well, maybe you just have to take advantage of time zones and play it 7 o'clock. It's only half an hour because it's not daylight saving. So if you play at 7 o'clock and 9 o'clock, I suppose you could do 8:30 in Darwin and have back-to-back games. But that's still going to just be TV eyes, not travelling fans' eyes, more than likely. So anyway, lucky the APL are there to sort these things out.
Yep. And, we've always heard over the last kind of 2 years that the relationship between them and Football Australia has been a lot better. Potentially, if this kind of, sequence of events does turn out, it'll be another test of that.
Certainly will. I think 7 and 9 o'clock is the best I can come up with. If they can do better than that, well, good luck to them. We'll wait and see what comes of that. But we know the season's heating up as we get into the last few games of the men's. Over in the women's, they wrapped their second last round. The top 6 are locked in. Canberra sealing that with their result we talked about a long time ago. Brisbane had every reason to finish in the top 3 or 4 at the turn of the year, but have absolutely slid out of contention, going down in some very dramatic fashion on Sunday. And fortunately, for something we're about to talk about, levelled the ledger for Newcastle, which we'll explain in a moment. But yeah, this Brisbane side have faded out. Canberra timed their run really well. And the Central Coast did enough to stay in there. So hats off to those two sides. But there's got to be some questions asked. I know there was a couple of injuries at Brisbane, but the way their season faded was really disappointing, especially in light of the fact their men were so poor this year as well.
Yeah, it's actually something that's not too uncommon in the dub, fascinatingly. We saw it with Perth Glory last season. They're a team that started extraordinarily well. And when you reflect on that season, they had a few key players that kind of injured through the midway of the season. They also had a very, very favourable run of home games towards the start of the season, which maybe fooled us into believing that they were a little bit better than what they were. And it'll be interesting to reflect once this season is done on what can we point to in this Brisbane side that has caused them to do the same thing. Obviously, the injuries are a factor, and that hurts you no matter what team you are. But to fall off the way they have and be one of the top teams of the competition, probably a little bit longer than what Perth were last season, and still fall out and, go into the last round and still not even have a chance, that would be very disappointing for this side.
Certainly wouldn't. Let's be honest, it's not a dub anomaly. We talked about Adelaide before, Wellington. The turn of the year, the calendar year, up top in the men's, Wellington started the season. Remember there was a point there when we were talking about how good New Zealand football is. They're 1 and 2, or, and we're talking about 6 or 7 rounds of a 26 game season. So, but again, it's something we see that you've got to be consistent over a whole season, and half a season doesn't get the job done. Canberra, they were the opposite. They started really slowly and have clawed their way back with some good form, and it's a good time to be in good form. And they've only they could potentially, depending on results this weekend, finish as high as 4th, which could be quite phenomenal. That to think only a few weeks ago they were outside and they could actually host a semi-final.
Yes, that's one of these kind of 3, I guess, main storylines going into it, right? You've got Western, Central Coast, and then Canberra, who are all, probably going to play each other in the first week of finals, right? But they're battling to host one of those games, right? So for the Central Coast and Canberra, they have to win and put the onus on Western United, who played last in the round, which is quite critical as well. So they'll go into their fixture on Sunday knowing what they need to do against Wellington to get that done. And then the big one up top, which I'm sure you're getting to, is the 2 Melbourne sides. I've said this probably pretty consistently over the last month, but it's so unfortunate for the City side that they've gone undefeated through a whole season. They still haven't wrapped up the title yet. So there's still a little bit work to do for them. And then the third storyline for me is when we're actually playing these games. I know it's kind of a football thing that you love to have all the games on the final day of the season all at the same time. So you have these really dramatic scenarios playing out, but that's just not quite the way we have it, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, before we delve into those fixtures, the one thing I did want to touch on was Newcastle and their red card dramas again. There's not much else happening in their season to talk about with the women. Heading into the Sunday of last week, Newcastle had 9 red cards. They had 2 players sent off in the first half. They had 9 red cards for the season. Lachie, can you tell me, do you know at that point how many red cards the rest of the competition had combined?
I reckon it's less than that. I reckon maybe 6.
7. So after the Perth and Brisbane game, it's now 9 apiece.
Crazy.
That's the rest of the league. So Sheridan Gallagher has 2. Daniel Kersniak has 2. Yeah, so I think there's only maybe 1 or 2 clubs that have 2 for the season, and they've got 2 players that have 2, and then the rest of their club also has another 5. there's obviously something there. And funnily enough, for Newcastle, there's a couple of games where they actually went down a player, then came back and won them, including one against Sydney earlier in the year. So maybe they should just play with 10. I don't know if that's a better tactic for Ryan Campbell, but look, I've got some concerns about the second yellow card that Sheridan Gallagher got on the weekend, and that's a whole other piece that we could go into and wax lyrically about in terms of officiating views of her and the way she goes about it. She doesn't help her own cause. I'll openly admit that as a Newcastle fan, but that is a trend in itself. To dominate a red card count in a competition is a concern, but to dominate the rest of the league in a comparative red card count in a 12-team league, we're not talking about a 2 or a 3-team league here. Like, they need to sort that out. Like, right, and again, I'm not saying it comes down to Ryan Campbell. I'm not saying it's instruction for Ryan Campbell. They're obviously playing it passionate, playing close to the line, but there's been a lot of silly red cards this year from Newcastle. Goalkeepers out of their box multiple times. Lorena Bauman's red card on the weekend was just, throwing a leg out after she went to ground in a clash and didn't like how it went down. Like, you're never going to get away with that. Like, it needs to be sorted out for Newcastle before next season, because they can't have, what's essentially been 8 games that are impacted by them being down a player.
Well, I mean, the answer is very clear, right, Chris? It's a simple one. There's obviously some cross-code confusion going on here. You've got playing, out of McDonald Jones sometimes, and you got the rugby posts and the rugby markings. You got Sheridan Gallagher who's come over, maybe throwing the rugby ball around in training sometimes. What do you mean you can't dive and touch the ball outside your box? I don't know. You can do that in other codes.
I think you're a bit off the mark there. Yes, you can play twice at McDonald Jones Stadium this year, and Sheridan Gallagher's got 2 of the red cards, but there's something more underlying there, and it's either a enforcement of discipline, it's a buy into club culture. I'm not sure. I would have loved to, but I didn't delve in when I was commentating with Cassidy Davis on an NPL game on the weekend, because I'm sure it would have been a bit of a sore point after 2 red cards in the first half and having to play with 9 players against Melbourne City. But anyway, we'll wait and see what comes of that. Let's hope that they don't make it double digits in the F3 Derby this weekend at Maitland. On that note, you talked about Melbourne City and Melbourne Victory before, and I know that Paletti, who does a lot of work with you, kept talking about the fact that Melbourne City were prepared to sacrifice their undefeated season if it meant winning other silverware. They don't have that choice really now. They need to win. They play on Friday night. They do play Perth over in Perth. It's a tough one, but they know if they win, they'll secure the Premiership, which will be the first of 3 trophies they're chasing. And then Melbourne Victory will turn around again, obviously in a winnable game if Melbourne City slip, and all of a sudden it could be on the line. And amazingly, even a draw here, I think, I'm not sure. I'd have to...
Yeah.
It's a draw here would be enough to open the door for Melbourne Victory, which would imagine losing no games in a season and not winning the Premiership.
Yeah, I think the goal difference is 11, so with the 2-point margin as well. So it's extremely unlikely that a draw wouldn't be enough. But you think about all the fixtures you could have, and it's like, okay, travelling to Newcastle is always considered quite difficult. Adelaide tend to get a pretty good atmosphere. Newcastle with the fan support as well. Canberra is pretty well supported. But if you just think about where teams slip up, not because of the football or because of the quality or anything logical, Perth away with the travel and just the vibe around it in what time are they playing? I can't quite see. It's a little bit blurry. It's 9 o'clock, right? It's late. So that kind of chaos time slot over on the West Coast, that is just it's where teams seem to fall over where they shouldn't. It's one of those intangibles in the A-League where all everything that is expected kind of just goes out the window. So if I'm a Melbourne City fan or a Melbourne City player, I'm going, do we really have to get Perth away as the final game of the season to lock home an undefeated season and to lock home the Premiership? It's just one of those fixtures that tends to get teams undone sometimes.
End of the day, Perth seems easy compared to a trip to Asia, especially considering the cattle they'll come up against there versus what they will likely come up against in Perth. But we'll wait and see. As we said, those 2 games have a massive bearing. Obviously, those games involving Canberra, Western United as well. We're looking at those jostlings for positions. And the Mariners, not only will they'll retain the F3 Derby trophy because it's Newcastle would have needed to win 2 games, but an opportunity to lock in a home semi-final. It would mean a minimal travel over the final couple of weeks for them because obviously Newcastle's just up the road. Then they would host a home final versus potentially, having to go down and play the likes of Western United or Canberra. That would be a huge advantage for the Mariners.
Yep, look, those home games are crucial. You get your home fans, which is obviously important, but a lot of the players will live quite close to the ground, so be able to sleep in your own bed and rock up for a big game like that. be in comfortable surroundings is really underestimated, I think. So having that familiarity is so critical, but they have to go out and win a game of football. And obviously Western have that 1 point lead, and they get to go and travel to New Zealand on the Sunday. And as I said, knowing what they had to do. So it's kind of freeing in a way for the Mariners to be able to kind of go out and get that result beforehand, because all of a sudden you're not, keeping your eye on anyone else. It's very easy to just lock yourself in and say, let's control what we can control. And hopefully for them, that's a victory against Newcastle on the weekend.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting one, as you said. Those two games, not quite concurrent, but it's going to be interesting, that 50-minute delay, how that all plays out with the F3 Derby and the Wanderers Canberra game, because, again, even for the Mariners and Canberra, you want to finish fifth rather than sixth, because sixth means a trip to Adelaide as well, which you touched on before is not an easy trip. Adelaide will be well rested, a long turnaround at home as well. So that's going to be interesting to see. So it's must win for, essentially basically at least one team in every one of these games. And none of the games see a finals team play another finals team, which is interesting coming into the final round.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes back to that kind of Perth analogy. It's like a slip up is going to determine if you drop your position here. It's not, as you say, like a big 6-pointer against the team around you. It is, and we've talked about this with the men's league a lot this season, you got to beat the teams that you're supposed to beat. And so often that doesn't happen. It's been a little bit more consistent in the dub, especially with the two Melbourne sides, Victory and City, throw in Adelaide as well. They've done a pretty good job of it. But yeah, that middle of the pack, Canberra and then Central Coast to a lesser extent, they just have to hope that the teams above them slip up.
Well, and there's a few teams there, the best part of 6 of them that'll just love to play spoilers to finish their season, finish on a good note, especially when you look at an F3 rivalry in terms of, but it's going to be a huge round. We look forward to heading into finals. There's lots to unpack, and the great news is it's an Easter weekend. We've got football from Thursday through to Sunday, an extra day of football, which is great to see across the two. Lachie, of course, if everyone wants to catch up on more football action, they can find you on YouTube or the website. Let us know where to look for you and the team.
Yeah, Roundball Australia, wherever you get your podcasts, hit us up on YouTube as well, or the website at roundballaustralia.com.au.
We move from the round ball and Mr. Consistent on to the man that pulls all the magic together, the man from the ones and twos, to talk about the Formula One. J.R. Carter, he's back. He's bigger and better than ever. I'm not sure you're bigger than ever. You're better than ever.
Look, again, drive by as I arrive. This just seems to happen every week when I show up. Something happens. Let's get to Formula One.
It's not even intentional. Yeah, let's talk Formula One. That's what we're here for. And we're up and about with the Formula One this week.
We really are. Oscar Piastri, second victory of the year and the first person to put two on the board this year. So great effort from Oscar. Led start to finish, which led to some television moments that were sort of a little bit people are up in arms about. But Oscar, super consistent. Qualified on pole. Didn't overshoot his pit box unlike his starting box unlike his teammate, where we're seeing some bit of Lando of old, where Lando is just choking on every little thing he can. But all in all, a really great looking race. Couple of interesting battles. Ollie Behrman starting from 20th, jumping up into the points to get 10th. Like that's a stellar effort from a young rookie. And Red Bull finally getting double points, where Max and Yuki, despite all the things that had happened throughout the week, Max and Yuki did manage to get points.
Well, Oliver and Yuki are two guys I have soft spots for a couple of different reasons, and we won't delve too deep into it, but both in the points, that was great to see. The Aussies are celebrating. Unfortunately, our Ashes rivals are probably celebrating as well. They had 3 drivers in the top 5, the Poms.
The Poms did have 3 drivers in the top 10, which probably leads to the other thing I wanted to sort of talk about, which was
Four in the top 10.
Yeah, no, you're right. You are right.
3 in the top 5, 4 in the top 10.
That's good going. But what reason I want to bring up the UK guys is, and I don't think it's actually the Sky Sports team that's doing this. I think it's they seem to be contracting their directorial roles like to something local each race, because we're seeing some different production values a couple of times recently. But for some reason, during the closing stages of the race, the broadcast director decided to stay on the Lando-George battle, despite the fact Lando was never going to get past him, and then just put Oscar winning the race in the little box to the left.
No one puts baby in the corner. That's just not on.
It's just not on, and like it's a big moment for us in Australia because we're getting closer to having our first championship leader in 15 years. The last time we had this was Mark Webber shortly before the infamous glass throwing incident, where his teammate, the German, may have disobeyed team orders to get ahead of him and get ahead of him in the championship. But like this is a big time for Oscar. Put him on the just give him the main feed. Put the little battle in the little corner.
Yeah, half and half like we do, mate. This is what good production is. You could do that and then talk about one. It's easy, right?
That's exactly right.
Well, the F1 broadcasters are certainly on notice. We hope they sort that out for next race when hopefully Oscar's winning again. We were talking about it before. The championship now heads to Saudi Arabia from Bahrain. Not a huge leap, but heading across to the other side to the Middle East. Not a great time zone for Aussie fans, but the silver lining is it's a public holiday for most people on Monday, so we should be up watching the race and hopefully a third Oscar win.
Yeah, so it's 3 a.m. start, both for race and quali. 11:30 p.m. start for any practice session. So, like, no matter what happens, people are going to be losing sleep on this one. But this is Oscar's best chance to get in front on the championship and just show the McLaren team like he is the best driver going forward. Like Lando will screw this up at some point. Oscar is just consistent every time he gets behind the wheel.
Well, the one thing I want to see is Oscar winning. Well, there's a couple of things I want to see. I want to see Oscar winning, and I want to see this man, the great Gunther Steiner. I want to see more from him. I know he's only doing some of the races on the broadcast, but if they can show us more Oscar and more Gunther, that's going to be worth getting up at 3 a.m.
The world's a better place if we do that. Like, the more Gunther, the better.
Exactly right. Well, it is going to be huge. 3 weekends in a row, 3 races in a row. It's getting busy. As you said, possibly the first time in 15 years we could have an Aussie leading the championship, and hopefully he grabs hold of this lead and never lets it go over season 2025. He showed on the weekend that he's the better driver in the team. They've got the best cars. There's some real magic in the air at McLaren, and hopefully Lando keeps on what Lando does. And Oscar can close that gap. I think 3 points at the moment, but he's got Max just 5 points behind him, and then George Russell not that far behind either. So realistically, we could come out of this race with any of 4 leaders of the championship.
Yeah, and like this is great for entertainment. And it's great for the sport, like to have it tightened up, like where we haven't seen like that. Like while it's good to see Max winning, and like when Max got a victory recently, it's better to see multiple drivers sort of up in that top 5, top 10. Really, like anyone could win a race this year, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the point too. And while those 4 have sort of broken away a little bit based on consistency, we've seen enough pace from a couple of the others. And then you've got that next little batch of 3 with Kimi, Charles and Lewis. And, I saw a meme today and it's, someone saying that, Lewis will never win a championship again. And then the bottom of the meme was someone crying. And look, that's a sad thought when you think about it. But he's going to need to show something. But you'd be a brave man to say Lewis will never win a race again. And, a bit of rain, a bit of mischief, a few other things go his way. There's any of those sort of probably 7 or 8 drivers that you could genuinely see with the right circumstances getting there and winning a race, which it's much better than we've been in years gone by where it's just been 1, maybe 2 people. And it's kind of like, unless these 2 people crash someone else, it's a bit more open. But again, it's even better that there's an Aussie at the front of that open.
That's right. Although we need to be careful sort of talking about rain going Saudi in these races we're in because there's not a high chance of rain in these next couple of races. So probably not a high chance of a Lewis victory next week.
Yeah, rain in the desert is not exactly, a frequent thing. But, hey, if anyone can, do a rain dance and get it happening, I'm the man for the job. But we'll turn our eyes to Saudi Arabia this weekend. There will undoubtedly be more stories of Lance Stroll being Lance Stroll, Lando Norris being Lando Norris, or some other weird, wacky and wonderful. Maybe we'll see flashes back of Lewis driving into the wrong pit. Who knows? But one thing we know is we'll talk about it again in the next couple of weeks as we continue to head down the F1 season. JR, as always, a big thank you to you for popping on in and keeping us up to date with all things Formula One.
No worries at all.
Well, moving on from the F1, it's time to get into the BIFs, the octagon, the ring as well, the square ring, that is. There's plenty to talk about, and of course, let's bring him back. He kicked off the show for us, and he's going to bring us home. The man from the Third Man Up podcast, he's back on deck, Brodie Burrows. There's lots to talk about here, mate. It's a good time to be an Aussie fight fan.
It is, and as we often talk about when it comes to a bit of BIFs, boxing, MMA, there'll be nothing going on for 2 months, and then everything gets crammed into 1 month, super fight month, I think you could call it. But Volk is champ again, mate. How good is it? Didn't have it all his own way, but it was back to the Volk of old, especially with his ring IQ. He was very smart. He sort of wasn't rushing in like he had done in his last few fights. He was calm and collected. And Diego Lopez, I mean, this kid is the future star of the division, of the UFC. Obviously, grew up in Brazil, now trains out of Mexico. And you can really see, I think, well, at the end of the fight, Volk knew he's going to be facing this guy again pretty soon, I feel. And I really look forward. It was a great fight. You know, both fighters had moments where they really controlled it. You saw Volk's fight. You saw his press conference after, looked pretty messed up. But then Diego, you know, he was the exact same. It was a great fight. And I think it's probably easily the best card of the year by a long way. And it's going to take a great card to beat this here in the future. I mean, the co-main event as well, Paddy Pimblett, Michael Chandler. Everyone thought the hype train that was, you know, Paddy Pimblett is going to get shut down. Or I tell you what, it's just picked up a lot of steam, and I think it's going to be coming off the track soon. There hasn't been this much hype behind a fighter since Conor McGregor. I really think in this one, he talks the talk, he walks the walk, and he keeps getting better and better inside of that ring. Putting Michael Chandler down like that, it's not something you see very often.
No, it's certainly not. There's lots of takeaways from that Volk fight. From the Volk fight card, UFC 314. But yeah, Pimblett's one of those. That job on Chandler is a phenomenal effort and continues to catapult him forward. Speaking of catapulting forward, the next opponent for the Volk, are we thinking Rodriguez is the next one, or do we go straight back to a rematch?
Look, Rodriguez looked unbelievable. I mean, Pitbull come in to this one here. It's probably one of probably the biggest hype around a debut for a long time in the UFC. Probably since I can remember. I mean, he's a Bellator legend. We've seen him in there, but he got in there and Rodriguez did what he does best. He kept his distance. We know he's one of the best black belts in Taekwondo in the world, but he kept his distance and he just picked him apart. And it just goes to show that whilst Bellator is one of the best, you know, martial arts leagues in the world, it is not the UFC. UFC is the number one, and you could really just see that in here. But look, for me, I'd love Diego to have a bit of time off, come back to this one. I'd love to see a rematch between these two. Just stylistically, they've matched up. They were both, you know, they got hit in the face a lot by each other. I mean, when Volk fought Rodriguez, Yair just couldn't get in. He couldn't break the great wall of Volk's defense. And another one on the card, probably worth talking about, is Silva up against Bryce Mitchell. I mean, Bryce Mitchell, probably the most controversial UFC fighter in the past 2 months, with a lot of things that he said has come out. But Silva's coming to this one and put him to sleep. Not something you see Bryce Mitchell, one of the best grapplers in the UFC, get put to sleep like that. Silva's definitely going to be one to watch. I mean, Dominic Reyes as well. I mean, let's not forget, 5 fights ago, he probably should have beaten John Jones. And then he went on to 3 or 4 straight losses. And then now he's back, 2 big wins like that. I think, he's really just confirmed himself as a force back again in heavyweight. So a lot to take out of this main card, but Volk, he is the pride of Australia, isn't he? There's not a man or woman in Australia that just doesn't love Volk. I saw a lot of people online actually. It's like, cooking with Volk as a fighter. It's like, it's a bit like Christian Petrarca as a footballer as well, but he's become a superstar, Volk, and you love to see it.
He certainly has. I did have to explain, speaking of people that have realised that cooking with Volk, he's a fighter. I did have to explain to a friend of the family who's a female. I won't name names. Well, she probably doesn't watch the show, but that it wasn't the same pit bull that is known for his rapping that was in the ring. So, much as a lot of people would like to probably punch him in the face.
Yeah, Mr. Worldwide.
Mr. Worldwide, indeed. Maybe that's what Pitbull needs to take on as his actual moniker in, just to really confuse some people in the ring. Speaking of results in the ring, mate, let's go to the square ring or the rectangle ring, not the octagon, and talk Tim Tszyu. Obviously, didn't have you on the show last week, so we've kind of held this one over. Tszyu back in the winning circle, defends his record in Newcastle, downtown Newcastle. It's got such a tie with his family, and really a bit like Volk. It was a precipice moment. Had either of them lost their fights, and it was a very inflection point in their careers potentially, because then they're on a losing run. Continued. What do you see as shaping up for Tim, and what did you take away from the fight?
Yeah, look, we both said when it comes to Volk and when it comes to Tim, It was all about the style of fight. You know, they can't go rushing in. They needed to get themselves into the fight, and then, you know, they were both the better fighters in completely different, you know, one's UFC, one's boxing, but they were both the better fighters, and they just had to get themselves in, get comfortable. That's what Tim did. And it looked like the Tim Tszyu of old, where he starts slow. He might even sometimes be down. He wasn't in this one, but often Tim is down. Maybe, you know, it was against Harrison early, two rounds to none. But then that's when Tim gets in. He finds his range, and then once he gets inside, he just batters him. And once he did get inside, it was a matter of time. It wasn't a matter if he was going to win. It was a matter of time to when he was going to finish. And eventually, the towel got thrown in, but it was always going to happen that way. And it was great to see Tim back fighting as Tim should, back to what he knows, not being reckless. It was like the shark when he's hunting his prey. And, you know, we saw that before. And then he did get knocked down. That cut affected him, and he wanted to come out and make a statement after that. Unfortunately, he tried making a statement against one of the most dangerous men in the world. And he was a statement in the end. But look, it was a great fight by Tim. Look, what comes next? I'm really looking forward to the fight between Fundora and Murtazaliev. What happens there? I think Murtazaliev has got him covered. Well and truly got him covered. Tim doesn't think so. Tim thinks Fundora gets him, but look, Murtazaliev is a different beast in that one. He's got a long way back before he's back competing for those belts, I think. But look, if Fundora loses, you know, then maybe that fight opens up for him.
Yeah, it's certainly an opportunity. I know there's talk of him maybe even changing weight categories.
Middleweight.
27, so to go to middleweight, correct? Yeah, so... But the next fight is going to be the interesting question. I think your analogy there of the shark, I kind of had him, you know, like a predator laying in wait, just sort of just maintaining space, maintaining control and waiting for that moment to just, and again, like a shark or, you know, maybe a cobra going after something, just boom, just coming in, snapping the jaws around and finishing it off. And that's his strength, that's his power, and that's what we want to see from him continuing on. He's got plenty of fighting left in him, and we can't wait to see what comes next. But it's great to see both Tim Tszyu and the Volk on the winning run, and hopefully that's a sign of things to come for Aussies.
Yeah, definitely. Also, Keith Thurman. I mean, that's a big one. He looked brilliant in his win over I suppose you call it, it was the young Aussie hype train, probably the next one behind Nikita Tszyu. But look, Keith Thurman, Tim Tszyu, sign me up for that fight. I'm buying that. I'm also buying all the press conferences that come before that. Anytime Keith Thurman's in there, he was brilliant for that. Pretty well run the whole promotion of that fight by himself, and it just goes to show there's no one that sells fights like the Americans, unfortunately.
There's certainly not. We talked about it before in Round the Grounds. A bit of animosity, a bit of beat up, a bit of build up. If you want some pointers on how to do it, footballers and other sports stars, then American boxers are certainly up there. We haven't seen the likes of the American boxing build up since Gary Hall Jr., but we know how that turned out for him, getting smashed like a guitar. Before we get out of the biffs, mate, let's switch back to UFC again. We'll have a bit of a longer lens look ahead to next month's big double-header title fight, the UFC 315. And again, the Aussie hype train rolls on.
Yeah, Jack Della Maddalena. Look, it's been a bit of a rise, a slow rise, I think you'd call. I mean, he's been solid in the UFC. Is coming up a pretty good win streak at the moment, but he's coming up against Bilal Muhammad, and stylistically, probably the most hardest fight for him so far. I mean, Muhammad is an absolute beast. You look at his control time so far. I think he's controlled over 60 or 70% of his fights, which is just absolutely insane. Once he gets you on the ground, good luck getting up. He's so strong, and he just goes for 5 rounds. We saw what he did to Sean O'Malley. I mean, no one had before had done that. But yeah, Jack comes into this one, and he's just awkward. And I think that's what's made Jack such a good fighter. I mean, he's very smart inside the ring, loves using the calf kicks early to really, weaken his opponent, but he's got to keep his space. If he lets Bilal, close that distance, it could nearly be, game over. He'll tire him early, and then he won't have that knockout power to knock him out late in the round. So I think it's all about for Jack to win this one, keeping his distance early, and then going in just working similar to Tim and similar to Volk, working his way into the fight and trying not to get caught by Bilal.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one, how he can stage that. I tell you what, looking at that press shot, they haven't done Bilal any favours. It looks like he's been through a few rounds and a few wrestles himself, so that might be a bit of a warning for Della Maddalena, and he's as we talked about off air, Brodie. Della Maddalena just looks like a sort of bloke you just wander in and see in the pub, and ready for a social chat. But geez, he can throw. So looking forward to that, and obviously the other title fight there as well for the women, mate. Is I'm looking forward to that. It's always good when we get two belts up on one card.
It is, and this is going to be, one of the closest. Oh, on paper, it's probably one of the closest championship fights we're nearly going to have all year. I mean, Shevchenko, a legend in the division, in the flyweight division, but coming on up against the French woman like Fowler she's a superstar. Like, she goes in there and she dominates. She doesn't just get the win; she dominates inside of that ring. And look, I think the challenger is actually the favourite for this fight, believe it or not, up against Shevchenko, but. Look, Shevchenko, for me, she's the champion for a reason. She's had 29 professional fights up against Fiore's 13. So, look, Shevchenko, for me, you can never bet against her. She's an absolute superstar. And every time she does have a loss or does have a poor performance, she comes back stronger and just closes the weaknesses in her game. So, look, I'm going to make an early tip, and I'm going to be going Muhammad and Shevchenko, but I really hope I'm wrong in that main event.
Yeah, I hope so too. It'd be great to see Jack get the win. I think if Fiorot wins, she's got some punch power, which you don't often, we don't always see in the women's divisions in some of these weight categories. Like, I think if memory serves, she's got about half of her wins, and again I think she's 12 from 13, have been by knockout.
Yep.
So that adds a bit of excitement that a lot of the time we don't necessarily see in the women's fights at the same proportion we do in some of the probably heavier men's categories as well. So. Certainly well worth tuning in, and we'll probably dig a bit more into that card as a whole in a couple of weeks, but just something to keep an eye on for Aussie fight fans as you said, this super fight month. We might extend it out to 6 weeks and keep it rolling.
Yeah, 6 first-round finishes for Fiorot too, which is just, like you said, unheard of in the women's division. So, and Shevchenko, one of the best natural strikers we've also seen. So I think it's just set up to be an absolute banger. Two really good main events. I think the women's one could even steal the show. I think that'd be an early favourite for fight of the night.
Well, we'll wait and see. As I said, we'll dig in a bit more in a few weeks. But until then, Broads, we'll let you take the gloves off and pad down and relax, mate. But thank you, as always, for coming on and giving us your expert eye over everything in the sporting landscape, but particularly the Biffs and Brawls this week.
Thanks for having me, mate. Look forward to talking again soon.
Well, there was certainly no shortage of sporting landscape that we spread ourselves across this week. A big thank you to Brodie Burrows from the Third Man Up podcast, coming in to talk Biffs and Barge and help us with Around the Grounds. Also on Around the Grounds to get us underway was Lachie Avil from Round Ball Australia. It is the home of all your A-Leagues and football updates across the season, and you can check out the team all over there and all their updates. And a big thank you to him for covering off football as well. Of course, our man who pulls the strings behind the scenes, he pops in as well to talk about the F1 and the motorsport, J.R. Carter. He's the one that makes sure that we get the show on the road each week, and a big thank you to him. And on debut, a shining debut, one of the best we've seen since the start of the show, Ben Dunn, getting things done, pardon the pun, with the NBA, keeping you up to date with all of what's happening there in the play-ins and the playoffs, and we'll catch up with Ben again in a few weeks. A huge show in all. We appreciate you tuning in, and make sure you stay up to date with us. You can, of course, catch us on YouTube here. Subscribe. Make sure you hit the bell down below, and that will keep you up to date when each of our episodes drop. If you want to be out and about and catching up with the show, you can, of course, listen to us on Spotify. Make sure you subscribe on there as well if that's more up your alley. But if you want to keep up to date with the black and white of your sporting landscape, no great opinions throughout the week in between episodes, the places to find us. You can find us on X. You can find us on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook at The Chris Mack Show. Give us a search, give us a follow, share us with your friends, and we will continue to keep you up to date. But in the meantime, we'll call it a close for today, and we look forward to coming back to you again next week with another wrap of your sporting landscape.